You were taught to be kind, but no one told you the cost. There is a quiet kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work or lack of sleep. It comes from constantly shrinking yourself, from saying yes when every part of you is screaming no, from smiling through disrespect, from tolerating what should have been confronted. You tell yourself you're just being kind, that you're keeping the peace, that it's better to avoid conflict. But peace bought through self-betrayal is not peace. It is silence in a war where the only casualty is you. The world teaches you early that being liked is a kind of currency, so you learn to please, to accommodate, to anticipate others' needs while burying your own. But here is the bitter truth no one told you. Kindness without boundaries is seen not as virtue, but as vulnerability. People may thank you for always being there, but they will not respect you for it. They may lean on you, but they will never follow your lead, because what is always available is never valued. You become the emotional janitor, cleaning up messes you didn't make, soothing people who never cared to understand you. And every time you swallow a reaction, every time you tolerate a little more just to be nice, you send a message that your time is not valuable, that your presence is cheap, that your voice is optional. You slowly fade into a version of yourself that even you don't recognize, smiling, nodding, agreeing. But inside, a storm brews, because the soul knows when it's being silenced. The pain you feel is not just about what others did. It's about what you allowed, what you justified, what you endured to keep an image of goodness that was never yours to begin with. There is no reward at the end of a life lived entirely for others. No medal for being the most agreeable, no honor in being the easiest to walk over. What matters is not how many people liked you. It is how many times you chose yourself, even when it was uncomfortable. You were not born to be small. You were not born to be a placeholder in other people's lives. You were born to be whole. And that wholeness begins the moment you stop calling your self-abandonment kindness. The world doesn't need another person who never says no. It needs someone who knows exactly when to. You thought you were being good. You were just disappearing. There is a version of you that learned very early to survive by pleasing. Maybe you don't remember when it started. Maybe it felt natural. Praise when you obeyed, distance when you resisted, smiles when you were easy to deal with, silence when you tried to speak your truth. Slowly, without realizing it, you became the person they needed you to be. Helpful, sweet, quiet, available. You were rewarded for being good, not for being real. And so you adjusted, you adapted. You noticed what made others happy and you gave it to them. You noticed what made others uncomfortable and you hid it. You traded your authenticity for safety, your honesty for approval, your power for connection. And in the beginning, it worked. You were liked, you were praised, you were called mature for understanding everyone's needs but your own. But inside, something started to fracture. You started to lose touch with what you really wanted, what you really felt, what you really believed. Every smile began to feel a little heavier. Every yes sounded more like betrayal. Every room you entered demanded a version of you that wasn't quite whole. Because when you are always what others want, you slowly forget who you are. And then one day you wake up feeling numb, or exhausted, or strangely empty, and you don't know why. Because nothing is wrong, but nothing is real either. This is the cost of the trap. a life that looks peaceful but feels hollow, a persona that functions but does not live, a soul that whispers under the noise of being liked that it is starving to be known. And here's the part no one tells you. People may love your mask. They may depend on your niceness. They may rely on your flexibility. But that doesn't mean they see you. In fact, the more perfectly you perform the role, the less likely they ever will. Because when you give everything away in exchange for being accepted, what you lose is not just your boundaries. You lose your presence, your essence, yourself. To break the trap, you must begin doing what once felt dangerous. Say no. Set limits. Disagree. Be inconvenient, not cruel, not careless, just honest. With yourself first, then with the world. You will lose people, the ones who only loved the version of you that never asked for anything. But what you gain is beyond measure. A return to truth, a return to presence, a return to the kind of kindness that doesn't erase you to exist. You were never meant to disappear to be loved. You were meant to be seen, and real love begins there. Peace that demands your silence is not peace. It is erasure. You don't yell, you don't argue, you don't start fights. People say you're easygoing, a good listener, someone who doesn't make a fuss. But inside, there's tension. There are conversations you replay in your head 1,000 times. Things you should have said, boundaries you should have set, but you didn't. Because you didn't want to start a problem, because you didn't want to hurt anyone, because you wanted to keep the peace. But peace, true peace, is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of truth. And if you're not speaking your truth, there is no peace. Just politeness, just performance, just a quiet kind of suffering that becomes a way of life. You swallow your discomfort. You ignore your intuition. You agree when you want to disagree. You stay when your soul is already halfway out the door. You've convinced yourself that if you can just be a little more understanding, a little more patient, people will come around. But they don't, because they're not responding to who you are. They're responding to who you pretend to be. And the more you erase yourself for harmony, the more they expect you to disappear. Until one day you don't even flinch when you're disrespected. You call it maturity, but it's actually resignation. You stopped asking for what you need. You stopped expecting to be heard. You became a master at peacekeeping and forgot what it feels like to be seen. And here is the hardest part. Every time you silence yourself to protect the relationship becomes more fragile, not less, because it's built on your disappearance. And any connection that depends on you shrinking isn't real. It's a performance. It's peace at the cost of your aliveness. You were not born to be agreeable. You were born to be whole. The world does not need more silence. It needs more people who have the courage to speak, even when their voice shakes. Who say no without guilt. Who say yes with their full heart. Who stop peacekeeping and start truth-speaking. That is how real peace is made. Not through control or silence or obedience, but through honesty, through boundaries, through presence. You don't have to be loud. You just have to stop disappearing. You don't have to fight everyone. You just have to stop fighting yourself. The parts of yourself you avoid become the authors of your pain. There is a part of you you try to forget, a version of you that carries shame, rage, envy, longing. It whispers during quiet moments and screams during conflict. But you push it away. You act like it doesn't exist. You mask it with kindness, numb it with distraction, rationalize it with logic. You've convinced yourself you are beyond it, that you are healed, that you are whole. But that part is still there, watching, waiting, writing your story behind your back. Carl Jung called this the shadow. Not because it is evil, but because it is unconscious. It is the container for all you've exiled. Every truth you were told was unacceptable. Every instinct you learned to silence. Every desire you were too ashamed to admit. You don't escape your shadow by pretending to be good. You escape it by making it conscious. Because what remains in the dark becomes dangerous. Not because it is bad, but because it is invisible. Your shadow does not disappear when ignored. It becomes your anxiety, your projections, your outbursts, your patterns. It becomes the part of you that sabotages relationships, that chooses the wrong people, that ruins what you worked so hard to build. And the cruelest part is that you don't even know it's happening. You keep thinking it's just bad luck, bad timing, bad people. But in truth, it's just unintegrated parts of you trying to get your attention through chaos, through pain, through crisis. The shadow does not want to destroy you. It wants to be seen, heard, understood, brought into the light. But facing it feels terrifying because it means seeing yourself as both beautiful and broken, noble and selfish, loving and cruel. It means letting go of the illusion that you are only one thing, only light, only calm, only kind. And that feels like death. But it isn't. It's the beginning of real life, of wholeness, of freedom. Because when you stop running from yourself, you stop giving others the power to define you. The mirror you fear is not your enemy. It is your liberation. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. You were never meant to shine without shadow. You were meant to stand in the full truth of who you are. When you look into the mirror without filters, without judgment, without fear, what you find is not a monster, but a self, desperate to be reclaimed. And in that reclamation, healing begins. Healing is not about being fixed. It is about becoming strong enough to hold all of who you are. You have been searching for peace as if it were a place, a moment, a finish line. You imagined that once you fixed yourself, the pain would stop. That once you became perfect, the struggle would end. But what if healing is not the absence of suffering? What if healing is the ability to feel your pain without losing your center? To know your story without becoming trapped in it? To hold the truth, all of it, without needing to run? Carl Jung did not believe in becoming perfect. He believed in becoming whole. And wholeness means you no longer exile parts of yourself just to be accepted. You no longer need to fake a smile or force positivity. You stop asking the world to give you permission to exist. You begin to carry your own truth, even when it's heavy. Especially when it's heavy, you become someone who doesn't collapse every time life gets hard. Someone who doesn't betray their soul to keep the peace. Someone who has walked through their own darkness and come back with wisdom. That kind of person cannot be manipulated, cannot be shaken by opinion, cannot be broken by rejection. Not because they are unfeeling, but because they are rooted. And this rootedness is not loud, it is not proud, it is quiet, steady, deep. You no longer fear being alone because you are not lonely within yourself. You no longer chase love because you have become the place where love begins. You no longer seek to be chosen because you have already chosen yourself. This is what healing really looks like. Not a perfect life, but a deeper life. Not a flawless version of you, but a real one. You are not the same person who began this journey. You may not even recognize yourself, and that is a good sign, because healing is a return not to who you were, but to who you were always meant to be before the world told you otherwise, before you were shaped by fear, before you were molded by silence. You have learned that your pain was never your enemy, that your shadow was not a curse, that your emotions were not mistakes. They were messages, all along. Now you hear them clearly. Now you carry them wisely. You are no longer lost. You are no longer broken. You are becoming whole, and that changes everything.